Hello, this is Jason Mundrag and welcome to my podcast Universal Consciousness, where I'm taking on everything in the universe and making it comprehensible to the collective consciousness. In this episode I will explain our powers of creation granted to us from Source. And so, let's get started. Realizing force in the known universe. To come to full realization as to how we utilize our powers of manifestations, we must dislodge our blocks we have on our whole conceptualizations of the known universe. Magic practitioners and people that pray go about attempting to create outcomes and wonder why the outcomes are never seen, if even in the slightest. Scientists reach the pinnacle of their fields of study only to become lost at the miraculous structuring they view in the universe. This is only because we refuse to see the fact that consciousness is a singular force which cannot be denied. It would be likened to viewing our concepts of God, but viewing the good side and not the bad. Consciousness must know consciousness for growth. As an absolute law, we do not know consciousness until we know it fully. Accepting all knowledge gathered from all sources and combining it is designed for true awakening. The Buddhist has embodied this. Should they follow the true path, their philosophy gives acceptance to learn all knowledge. It will present force in its physical and spiritual forms. Then I will explain how we create as conscious beings, or feed off this force as unconscious entities. Should just one become enlightened through this podcast, then let the universe rejoice. Force in the scientific sense. Physics defines force as having four particular types, all directly influencing the atom, the glue that holds together the universe. I believe we all by now have learned of the parts of an atom, yet this discovery is ever evolving. Within the center of the atom is the cluster of any two protons and neutrons around the nucleus. The first type of force is called the strong nuclear force because its power to hold together protons and neutrons is unfathomable. When these protons and neutrons form a new element by connecting around the nucleus, a barrier is created around them which will no longer allow any more protons or neutrons. This force is called weak nuclear force. Both these forms of force are short-ranged, existing only in their initial space. Electromagnetic force is the force which exists between all particles which have an electric charge. For example, electrons, negative charge, bind with nucleus of an atom, due to the presence of protons, positive charge. The deeper we dive into fragmenting the parts of these atoms, the more conscious we become. We currently define an atom as the smallest particle that a chemical element can exist. These atoms combine to form molecules, which are two or more atoms that are more advanced chemical elements. Protons and neutrons is what composes the center of atoms. We now have come to understand some of the makeup of protons and neutrons. They consist of what we now call quarks, which are elementary particles which combine to form composite particles to form what we call hadrons. The most stable hadrons are protons and neutrons, which are the component parts of atoms. In fact, over the years as scientists view these protons, they continue to document protons becoming smaller and smaller without scientific explanations. I believe another will come forth with this consciousness. Quarks may be reasoned to be infinitely small, according to the theory of our standard models. This asserts that quarks, along with electrons, are point objects with no size at all. Smaller than this we have conceived of neutrinos, which are subatomic particles that zip through the cosmos at nearly the speed of light by cosmic rays, nuclear reactions from exploding stars, or the atomic decay of atomic nuclei or hadrons, which is still in theory. Neutrinos pass through us tens of thousands of times each day and have no physical effects of which we currently consciously know of. We do scientifically know that neutrinos do not possess mass or electrical charge. I will not venture into further understandings of the Planck length, for current theory states that such investigations could result in a formation of a black hole. I have no comments to such considerations. Force is long-range, in fact, infinite in length of distance. Many everyday experiences such as friction and air resistance are due to this force. Imagine all the different factors of the wind moving throughout many directions in a deep forest. The electrons are constantly meeting resistance among the trees and will need to create multiple pathways to move through. The gravitational force is the force that holds us onto the earth. Gravitational force is cumulative and extended to infinity. It exists whenever there is matter. Your body is experiencing a gravitational pull between you and whatever means you're listening to this podcast, or anything close to you or as far away as stars and galaxies, but the effect is so small you will never sense it. However, you can sense the gravitational pull with the earth, that is, your weight. Due to the cumulative effect of billions of the atoms within your body and those atoms of the earth. This means that the larger the body, containing more matter, the stronger the force. Though all extremely interesting, the last two have the most apparent influence on our existence, whereas the first two could, if we understood them better. Spirits create on a canvas by manipulating force. We view this as manifesting. Most of us never contemplate the breakdown of an atom and so never absorb critical knowledge that has been brought to us for collective understanding. The only force that matters to us is the strong nuclear force. I must also state that as a society we have actively defined how we look at the universe. Since it is in our nature to label our beliefs, it would be pertinent to place this information here. 1. Materialism is the view that overall, everything exists as matter and energy. This became the most popular view in the 20th century. 2. Realism is the view that the entire universe exists independent of our observation. 3. Solipsism says that only your mind exists, and anything outside of it doesn't exist. Perhaps influenced by Eastern philosophy, yet still not fully realized. 4. Idealism states that reality is a mental construct and doesn't exist independent of observation. Here in number 4 is where I seek to take us. It's so important to understand that the truth has been debated by some of the greatest minds, even Einstein. Though each represents our evolution and realization individually. I urge you to take the journey on your own to gather your own beliefs or understandings, for we live now in a society where a wealth of knowledge is available to us all. Within the known universe, force operates in many different forms depending on where on the chart you reside, of which I presented in past episodes on realms. As we have seen, the laws of operations vary dramatically on opposite sides, mainly because chaos is attempting to replicate order and failing. Because of this, a spirit that is pushed into the outer universe must apply different techniques to stimulate creation even closely. Even then the odds are stacked against them until they are able to reconnect to source. When these spirits are aware enough to pull themselves out of this unconsciousness, they can do so on their own through the techniques I presented in those episodes, or seek out a child of light to assist them. Force within the realm of order is much more manageable. As spirits capable of growth, we are able to utilize all our resources to make visualization manifest in countless ways. Sometimes with just simple thought patterns or heartfelt needs become reality. As this is done, however, we rarely acknowledge our part in the creation. The Native Americans have a ceremony called counting coop. Within this ceremony they pass a pipe around and speak aloud their blessings. No need to smoke for this each night, but let's take it a step farther. Accept your part in the creation of these blessings. They would not have come to you if you never desired them. We must step away from the way of thinking that the source of consciousness simply gave us what we needed, but to look at the depths of our souls and realize we asked, and the universe provided. While within the outer universe we still create, but through different levels of fear. I will never get that job, I'm worthless, and nobody loves me, and so, it becomes true. The recordings within our head are relentless, even when we think we no longer hear them, they have laid roots and created a wall to block us from the truth. I'm reminded of the strong pessimist who will constantly fear the worst in every situation, and as the worst occurs it simply strengthens their belief that the world works in these self-conceived dark ways. Never once aware that they created these conditions. This is just one of the many ways we push ourselves into hopelessness and despair. Consider it universal law. Know that we create our heaven and hell. I'm sure it would be nice to lay our entire existence on a Godhead, we then get the added benefits of also placing the blame. Then there's the next extreme, not believing in anything, all of life by random occurrence. This speaks only to me that they have given up on even attempting probing deeper contemplation of existence. It became much easier for them to simply live their lives in what they feel is non-distraction. The atheist is not lost as some may think, however, they have just stepped back to look at the full picture for a lifetime, even if they aren't aware of this. They have accepted their role to create their own desires, and this is an admirable accomplishment when we are hard-pressed these days to pick a side. Taking self-control of our existence is key in becoming an awakened being, because we must accept our power to bend force to our will and create all that we experience. Force moves in 3 different forms that we can access: forms, streamers, and waves. This is true for the entire universe, but remember they function differently at times within the outer universe because we lack full control. We connect to this force by connecting the very nature of the atom. A quantum mechanics theory called the observer effect tells most of what we need to know on this. In these facts they explain how an atom manifests when we search for it. How an atom exists in a wave scattered across the universe, yet simply by us directing our consciousness to search for it, it appears. This is mind-blowing to the scientific and spiritual world. For the very first time since these two paths divided, they came to a real comprehension that they were on the same path. This strengthened the collective consciousness, acknowledging that even science is collecting answers that will lead us towards our destinies. The pure contemplation of this theory speaks to what Buddhist masters have said for over 3,000 years, that to know the mind is to become a Buddha. Within the collective consciousness we have decided that the chair is a chair, or a house a house. These materials exist by our will alone and enforced immensely by millions of years of corruption. Great explorers set out to find something new, and lo and behold, they do. We've added matter to our universe as easily as we've sought it out, then spoke of it to millions, and they too added to their consciousness, enforcing it and stabilizing it for the future generations to see. Not in the slightest realizing that we are manifesting our own environment and have been, for millions of years. Can it truly be all that easy? Is it so hard to believe that all these centuries we dreamt of flying and walking on the moon and it was made manifested through technology? Would it really matter how we created the means as long as our visualizations occurred? Controlling the movement of force and creating is what we do as spirits, physically building matter only because we exist in the physical realms and are reflecting our true potentials but never realizing the truth. Even stuck in awe of the megaliths because we have forgotten our true natures. The creators becoming one with their creations, however, we did not expect. There has already been ample supply of speeches from all sources that speak to us about the dangers of becoming attached to material. We have been screaming this now for over 4,000 centuries. And yet here we are, smothered in our creations, making them the only way that we move, eat, and work. This is where the two sides of the known universe meet. Spiritually we scream on one side, no. We are losing ourselves to materialism. While the other half says, this material is our only way to survive, we need it. Hasn't this come to pass? Can any of us imagine life without a microwave, or a car? Some think it will take a cataclysm to make us once again live a simpler way, but it's not needed. Understand this only, everything that we have created is for a purpose. It is for us to see these creations for what they are truly manifesting. We should become aware of our power to restructure and recreate our lifestyles as well. The trouble of living years unhealthy, and then to find that place deep inside when all appears bleak, only to transform ourselves in miraculous ways. Understanding that spiritual journey that was just taken, how corruption was eating away at our very soul, yet we possess the greatness somewhere inside to pull ourselves out and into the realm of order. There are countless stories of us reaching the very end of our ropes and realizing we were so much more than what was being repeated inside our heads. We denied accepting that this was all that there was, and somewhere deep inside voyaged into new ways of conceiving the world. It was force that we wielded to make these changes. In the top chart I presented, I will show you what type of force is within each of the realms and subrealms. Then I will go into an understanding of how these types of force functions within both parts of the universe. Lastly, I will briefly explain the type of force I've had yet to mention that's marked as other. Force in our known universe. Here force operates as an extending pattern of conscious thought stimulated through the minds of beings. Order as we know it, will generally function in our current known universe in three parts: forms, waves, and streamers. As we leave from physical consciousness and into the outer universe, we begin to see that the same laws no longer apply, or in the least have some variations. Note also that beings are able to exist in multiple places. For instance, a human may have a physical body, but due to the pain and suffering they have endured, it pushes their consciousness into the outer universe and locks them like an anchor to their false viewpoints. I have had an experience with a friend that had lost the ability to walk during an explosion in the military. Wherever he fell asleep within our apartment, his etheric form would attempt to pull himself away from his body in an agonizing expression. Never to be able to move from his midsection area. As I would talk him through his spiritual struggle, he did not initially know of this suffering and was easily angered when discussed. It took time and conscious effort to free him from this state. Depending upon what paths they take, there could still be strong possibilities that they will come back to the collective. Even still, upon death, that same spirit may still have enough connection to consciousness to continue to live well into the collective universe. However, a continued amount of suffering and acceptance, from a continued amount of lives, can only conclude that at the time of any death the rebirth will be in the outer universe. Yet again, while their life is being processed through the realm of entropy, dimension, and fears, they will still exist as we know them in the physical universe, with a completely different perspective about life and in the unconscious collective. They will mimic life in the conscious world and contort what is known as truth. They are still capable of the full range of emotions that are available to the human understanding within their individual means, but they will take these emotions to places where an evolving consciousness would never. Their concepts of oneness and their depth of love isn't wholesome like most, but reeked with conditions that could be of any poor capacity. A greater being told me once, that our truest power is the ability to change our thoughts, perhaps the only key to helping our spiritual siblings back at this point. This is different if they move into the dimension of internalizations. Here the suffering and acceptance takes on a deeper hold and the soul moves into the abysmal realms. They will lose their physical forms and stay there locked in their pain. Forms within the collective are particles that through the consciousness of spirits formulate waves and streamers that solidify when they are locked by our creative powers. Though we may call this visualization, or prayers, manifesting forms is completely dependent upon the consciousness that has created it. Whereas awakened spirits will have control over their direct environment and utilize forms to create therein, greater spirits can possess power to create forms with much larger areas of their environment. Perfected beings, however, is what we would conceive of as gods. Within the collective consciousness, we universally create the forms that we see upon the planet. Forms are force that begin as waves, then connected through streamers by observation to create shapes. Most of these shapes required little of our attention to maintain, as we have become accustomed to this matter throughout lifetimes. Individually, however, we at times desire something that isn't within our current environment. This is when our true spiritual natures flourish. Streamers shoot forth and influence the waves, and the waves respond by bringing the desire into the known universe. This new form, creation, is only as permanent as the force that the spirit wields through its consciousness. These forms can continue through lifetimes, should the original spirit pass to other spirits the awareness of the creation's importance. An example would be a poor person that becomes a CEO by building up a company from scratch. She's about to pass and has instilled in everyone in the company the importance that they have in the world, and has led a life helping others grow from a poor state like herself. The omni-consciousness, when reflecting through the source of consciousness, supersedes all other consciousness. In considering the collective consciousness, all must agree on the importance of the created forms for them to be maintained for an evolving awareness. Here we find the collective struggles over what is right for all, and the unconscious concepts of what is right for an individual. An example here would be major societal/global issues that have looked at the better good for the entire planet. It's also here where we begin to understand how very little the collective consciousness has actually been able to do when it comes to creating a better world. Greater beings have been able to form better societies, but collectively we have yet to consciously unite on a form which will create a better planet. This is also when we begin to understand that the source of consciousness does not take sides in the experiences. Either unconsciousness overtakes us, and this planet falls into the outer universe where life forms continue to fall into extinction until none are left, or consciousness forms an existence which takes us to a place of spiritual growth and abundance for every life form. Either way, there is no death to the omni-consciousness. We are but a portion of life in a sizable body beyond our concepts. It is for us to connect back to the source. Only then will we be granted attention and be able to call into creation massive changes on this planet. Forms within the outer universe are places that, if any of us had the hardships to see, have tried to forget. Here are the places we talk about in stories as supernatural phenomena. Repetitious lives of clinging on to the outer universe has strung a tattered, dulled subconscious realm around the places where consciousness resides. These are the scattered places that beings reside after physical death, for any amount of time. For beings of these dimensions, their unconsciousness manifests everything as real forms, from painful deaths to repeating struggles. Every unconscious being clasp onto one another in a parasitic arrangement when no conscious beings are present. But due to existing without a physical form, the outer universe can now grasp onto the screams and drain their powers of creation to solidify them into nightmares. For in the unconscious level of the omnipotent design, these beings will now merge with this stagnated energy and in turn replicate an altered existence. There are few places where forms such as this occur in the outer universe, yet they are all associated with incredible numbers of spirits that have lost their way. At this point, only a greater being can develop the ability to free these souls. They are beyond the reach of normal spirits and awareness. They are consumed in a world that is a webbing of all the echoes of suffering there. Depending on how powerful that suffering is, it may bleed out into the physical world and be noticed by aware beings. There have been many misconceptions about these places. The strongest is that a ghost is created by just one bad dramatic death. When in reality this type of being existed many lifetimes in turmoil and suffering to such an extent that when the unaware person examining this being's life, they would think it was a singular grand atrocity. The same would be true for beings that are born into a lifetime of war and killing. Their unconscious natures place them into such a life. Despite the debates, it is not, nor will it ever be within our natures as spirits to murder another aware life when we are part of the collective consciousness, for we know well our unity through all living experience. Places that have been in continued wars are a repetition of unconscious activity that recycles as new births are created. Eventually those few conscious spirits leave the area and seek to get away from the pain. Others will stay and make up reasonings as to why the wars are right. That is, at least until that one death places them in one of the outer sub-realms of forms. Anywhere that we place our thoughts, the universe manifests on levels that most of us seem to be oblivious by. Waves within the collective are conjoined masses of particles moving in a continuous wave beyond our current conscious comprehension. Within the micro-universe, these waves are made continuously active by the billions of spirits pushing them around with their constant flow of thought patterns. Particles consistently bounce about, although something miraculous occurs when we observe all items in our conscious universe with any form of precision. This force by our observation becomes noticed. This occurs faster than you can view any item in your realm of vision. Consciousness prepares quicker than any physical movement. Here, your intentions will masterfully create all matter that we as a collective have considered it to be. This is also why we are so intensely focused on wonderful new items we view for the first time. Our consciousness is absorbing and categorizing it as it slowly is being processed. The arts especially have this effect, because it is unknown to us and must be realized for the first time from what the artist is attempting to display. In meditation or deep prayer, we slow the waves. This is done by slowing our concepts of thought patterns that arise when we focus our intention on a single point. By placing our observation on the very act of creation itself in the collective universe, we move outside of the constant waves that flow from all other sources. Waves are usually directly viewed through our singular observation. The only way to view the entirety of the universe is to view waves throughout a collective conscious observation. In the collective universe, waves make up everything that we do not view within our vision. The pure fact that the waves form into matter as we move about our day is the indication of truth that we reside within the physical universe. Here, waves adhere to a collective understanding of what consciousness and unconsciousness perceive them to be. Waves within the outer universe act quite different. Imagine an electric jolted explosion that at the very end of its intensity freezes into place. Scattered is its branches and varied in its size. These waves simply cannot pulsate or grow due to their lack of connection to source. Beings that are of this universe are dependent on just their personal supply of energy. It sprays forth in varied amounts around these beings as they go about their day as if pulsated, much like a heartbeat. These waves are completely reliant on getting energy from the being, so as the being moves about, the static explosion freezes, and will generally stay there for a time depending on the strength of the thought. Whatever the corrupted thoughts are of the being they have originated from, the wave will continue to replicate as any other souls walk through the area. If the wave is intense enough in emotion, it will grasp at any other soul and attempt to feed off its energy, this way attempting to maintain a continued flow as it would do if it was in the collective universe. Not all waves are this strong, but this type is most dangerous around heavy populated areas. It will cause disharmony and disarray in a place for a very long time until cleansed. Most times when psychics walk into a zone and feel negative energy, this is what they are feeling. For the beings that are capable of making these waves, they are usually the type of people positive spirits simply avoid as if by instinct. For those of us who haven't the choice, the effects of being by them can be only destructive if we aren't aware of their negative energy. Streamers inside of the collective would be considered consciousness incarnate. Start by becoming aware of yourself reading these pages. Your consciousness is a stream that moves from your observation to the pages and stimulates wave particles to form a page for you to read. This stream of consciousness is within every spirit in a never-ending innumerable flow that originated with the creation of life through the omni-consciousness. Your parents observed your conception, you observed your children's, and so forth in this way since beginningless time. This is not simply produced once you lay witness to these forms but manifested by us far before such conceptions. We can come into this life seeking new understandings and manifesting families, and this will ripen as such. We have always been conscious of one another as these multiple interconnecting flows of force encompass the planet and manifest life. There is a continuous flow of creation within each picosecond, 1/1,000,000th of a second, some even at once. Imagine consciousness as a constant flow of creation streaming throughout every soul on the planet at once. Streamers here function as an unimaginable stream of force connected to every conscious being on the planet. As one spirit creates, so does every being become aware of that creation consciously. When, for the first time, we are introduced to something new here in the collective, we integrate that with our personal experiences of existence. We then balance what is good about the item, and the collective consciousness adds it to a new viewpoint. Streamers, being connected to the whole of the known universe, is our spiritual route to beginning consciousness. Very much like a constant pulsating flow of force that leads back to originality. Within this encircling force of streamers, so too is the knowledge of every other form in the material world that we have conceived thus far. Hence the reason why the knowledge of trees and forms are held within our awareness even when we aren't physically observing them. It's been added and strengthened by thousands of other observations. Lastly, when considering how the world functions, we have developed this by streamers of force within the collective consciousness. This means, since we have postulated globally on how life forms, populate, and grow through our scientific fact-based model, they now do so as we have defined them. Streamers and waves stand ready to form the instant we search for them with our awareness while following our collective standards. Streamers inside the outer universe operate primarily as a stream of force that feeds without growth or connection to any form of other life. Here the unconscious beings will observe objects the same way as explained earlier, the streamers moving forth to influence the waves to materialize. Note that they only originate from the being and not from the universe. However, the streamer will push force into the particles, and as I have said, the waves will freeze in place. Should the unconscious being wish to maintain its connection with form, it takes effort. This may be displayed with levels from uncomfortable agitation to extreme aggression. Consciousness here takes a constant effort, which in turn drains the limited supply of force. Streamers of force that originate from an unconscious being develop only to feed off other force, much like a survival mechanism. When unconscious beings connect to conscious beings, they will become aware of the other consciousness due to their need to feel that they exist. They will activate everything they have learned, many times negative emotions and techniques, to keep the attention of the conscious being and satiate their need to feel real. These streamers will not be enough and will pulse once and disperse, and so the unconscious being must continuously create overblown events to keep and feed off a conscious being's energy. For them, it can literally feel like death if they can't keep the conscious being's attention. This is much deeper than self-centeredness. Since the being is no longer fueled by the source of consciousness, it no longer feels a connection to all. It conceptualizes a universe where they are the only one in it, and therefore every experience it has had is all there is. Without any new understandings, existence takes on the unconscious being's observations of only what has occurred to it. New understandings can no longer become originated by them. They may take on clinging to a well-supply energy of consciousness in individuals or groups in an attempt to replicate the collective universe. Strong light workers are able to reconnect these broken streamers briefly, but the unconscious being must be able to try to reconnect. There is specially designed force that cannot be categorized within the known actions of force. For these I call other. When considering the higher realms, most of our concepts no longer apply. Other force within the collective universe. These realms are the domains of greater beings we have at times called gods. They are a collection of strong spirits that have surpassed the physical universe and reside here for a multitude of purposes. They may reside whenever they wish. Some make their home within the infinity stream, a place beyond the concept of time, and yet all places in the known universe at once. Creation takes on new laws here as we expand our consciousness to that of universal understanding. We blend our awareness with that of our Creator within the realm of order and renew ourselves as we gain insights into creation beyond any former comprehension. Other force within the outer universe. This type of force is mainly in the realm of entropy. We can usually realize where the source of power is coming from in a realm where there are specialized energies or other within. Within the outer realm, specialized or other is generally where power is being concentrated. This is due to the processing and restructuring it takes to break down a conscious spirit. A spirit can stay within the grip of corruption for any amount of time before it resurfaces inside the outer physical universe. The other place is within the higher realm of dark matter, where beings have been dispersed to such an extent from their consciousness that they are reborn as beings that mimic the unconscious level of the omnipotent design. They feel themselves to be the will of the universe and now actively participate in its expansion. It would be an extreme rarity to discover these types of beings, for they live in places we have never ventured and have appetites we could not fathom. If they should influence, it would be from afar. If the suffering and pain was loud enough, it may possibly attract their attention. This concludes our powers of creation. Thank you for listening and peaceful journeys. If you enjoyed my podcast, please consider helping my progress in any way. Please feel free to contact me, or subscribe, find me on my social networks, share, like, and of course any monetary assistance will be placed back into my work. I am a new author of just under a year and have really made my work completely within reach at just 99 cents on Amazon Kindle. The information is more important than anything, but everything helps in a collective way. Thank you again.